So this week on my Instagram account, I brought up the idea of our story and the character in our story and letting that go. And I wanted to explore that a little bit more here on YouTube. And the idea here is that the ego, the narcissistic ego, loves to suffer. And so most of our problems arise in the story of I, me, or my. And so when you're sitting with a trigger, you'll notice a story that is there. And that is, I feel this about this thing that's happening to me or this thing that I've done. And all that is centered around the main character, which is you. But the main character, which is the ego, isn't really who you are. So one way to kind of step back from this a little bit is to remove both the I language and the label of the emotion. So for example, let's say you're frustrated that somebody cut you off and made you late for work. You would remove I and the feeling of frustration or the label of it, and you're left with just this feeling. And then what happened is this person cut you off, you remove you, and so this person cut off, and ultimately it's just erratic driving, right? So you have just what happened, which is erratic driving behavior, and the feeling that is resulted in that. And that feeling has a payoff. You're emoting because the emotion is a form of communication. It was our first line of communication before we learned words. So on one level, you might be emoting to try to get something in return, significance, sympathy, righteousness, and that is your payoff. The other part could be just the feeling itself, that you're so used to feeling that it's energetic. So there's a charge to it. You may be so used to going to that charge that you find some sick satisfaction in it. So whatever the reason for it being there, it is a feeling that is happening. And when you remove I, me, my, and what's happening to me in the story of the central character, which is your ego, who loves to suffer, you're left with just this feeling. And so then the question then becomes, can you surrender the feeling that you're experiencing in that moment? Can this feeling be surrendered? It's not like you do this. Can this feeling be let go of? And you might even notice that you're kind of holding on to it a little bit, that there's a grip to it. So ultimately what's happening there is this need to be there, and it is often of the ego, and it loves to suffer again because in its suffering it creates this desire to look for something outside of us. And from a survival mechanism, that's really great. When you're hungry, you need to go and do something about it. But most of our problems are made up in our mind. Things are just happening. You don't suffer. You aren't a victim. You weren't abused. It doesn't mean those things didn't happen to the physical body, to the mind, but it's a story of this is happening to me, or this happened to me, that keeps the ego alive, keeps the narcissistic vanity aspect alive. So you're really just surrendering the feeling that creates a payoff. So hopefully that helps you in your journey of self-discovery and healing.